George Cooper worked 2 jobs in the last year of his life. Football coach during the day, whatever he could find at night. His body was breaking down, his marriage was cracking, his blood pressure was climbing. He was in his early 40s and he looked 50. And every extra dollar he earned went into the same place. A fund for Sheldon's college education. Because a genius son at a real university costs real money. And the Cooper family did not have real money. They had George's body. And George was spending it like a man who knew the account was running low. What George did not know was that the account was running low because someone was making withdrawals. Not the IRS. Not a medical emergency. Not an unexpected bill. His mother-in-law, Connie Tucker, Meemaw, the most beloved character in the entire franchise. The woman who smoked cigarettes and drank whiskey and called everyone darlin' and made the audience laugh every time she walked on screen. That woman was sitting at a card table in her living room, losing the money that was supposed to send Sheldon to college, while George was killing himself to earn it. And nobody told him. Nobody told him because nobody knew how to tell a man who was working himself into an early grave that the woman who babysat his children was gambling away the reason he was working in the first place. I need to tell you something before we go any further. Meemaw was my favorite character. Not was, is. Even after making this video, she is still my favorite character. And that is exactly why this video needs to exist, because the show built Meemaw so perfectly, made her so lovable, made her so warm and funny and sharp, that the audience gave her a permanent pass. She can do anything. She can manipulate anyone. She can gamble away a child's future, and the audience forgives her before the scene is over, because she follows it with a one-liner and a cigarette. The show weaponized our love for Meemaw. It used our affection as a shield so that the things she did would never be examined under the same light we use for Mary or Sheldon or anyone else. And today I am turning that light on. Not to destroy Meemaw, to understand her. Because what she did with that college fund is not a character quirk, it is a pattern. And the pattern connects to every broken thing in the Cooper family. There is a concept in addiction psychology called a functional addict. It describes someone who maintains the outward appearance of a normal, productive life while sustaining an addiction that is quietly destroying the system around them. The bills get paid, the house looks fine, the children get fed, and nobody notices the addiction because the addict is skilled enough to keep the performance running while the foundation rots underneath. Meemaw is a functional addict. The show never uses that word. The show uses the word fun. Fun Meemaw, wild Meemaw. The grandmother who plays poker and drinks whiskey and has boyfriends and does not follow the rules. The audience sees fun. Addiction psychology sees a woman using gambling, alcohol, and relationships as coping mechanisms, while the family around her absorbs the consequences without knowing they are absorbing anything at all. The gambling is the most visible symptom, but it is not the disease. The disease is avoidance. Meemaw cannot sit with discomfort. She cannot have difficult conversations. She cannot tell Mary the truth about her religion. She cannot tell George the truth about his marriage. She cannot tell Sheldon the truth about his behavior. She cannot face the slow collapse of her daughter's family, because facing it would mean feeling it. And feeling it is the one thing Meemaw has spent her entire adult life engineering systems to avoid. The poker table is not entertainment. It is a room where feelings do not exist. Where the only thing that matters is the next card. Where the weight of a family in crisis gets replaced by the weight of chips on green felt. Meemaw is not gambling for money. She is gambling for numbness. And the cost of that numbness is measured in a college fund that quietly emptied while a man quietly died. Let me walk you through what the show actually tells us about the college fund, because the details are worse than most people remember. Mary and George established a savings fund for Sheldon's college education. This is established early in the series. The family is not wealthy. George is a high school football coach. Mary is a church secretary. Every dollar they put into Sheldon's fund represents a dollar they did not spend on the house, on Georgie, on Missy, on themselves. That fund was built on sacrifice. It was built on Friday nights George spent coaching instead of resting. On summers Mary spent working instead of being with her children. On years of choosing Sheldon's future over their own present. And Meemaw had access to money that was connected to the family's finances. She was not a distant grandmother who visited on holidays. She was embedded in the household. She babysat. She drove Sheldon to school. She was in and out of the Cooper house every single day. And she had her own money. Money that, as the show reveals, she was systematically feeding into an illegal gambling operation she ran out of her own home. The show reveals that Meemaw gambled away a significant amount of money. She got so deep that she needed to be bailed out. She used a man named Charlie, a wealthy boyfriend, to get the money. She manipulated Charlie using charm and vulnerability to extract financial support for her gambling debts. And when Charlie could not be used anymore, she moved on to Dale. A pattern of men used as ATMs to fund an addiction the family pretended was a personality trait. Now here is the detail that ties it together and makes me genuinely angry. While Meemaw was gambling and needing bailouts and manipulating boyfriends for cash, George was working himself to the bone. The same George who sat on the patio alone, the same George who was told he was not good enough by his wife, the same George whose body was showing signs of the stress that would eventually kill him. That George was earning money during the day and lying awake at night worried about how to afford a genius son's education. And his mother-in-law was losing money at the same rate he was earning it. The show never draws this connection explicitly. It never puts George at his desk calculating bills in one scene and Meemaw at a poker table in the next. But the timeline overlaps perfectly. The years George was working hardest are the years Meemaw was gambling deepest. And the college fund that was supposed to grow was being drained from two directions. George was pouring in from the top. Meemaw was leaking from the bottom. And here is what makes this worse. Meemaw does not just gamble. She runs the game. She operates an illegal gambling room out of her own home. She is not a casual player losing a few dollars at a friendly poker night. She is the house. She takes a cut. She manages the table. She profits from other people's losses while sustaining her own addiction on the side. Think about what this means in the context of the Cooper family. Mary is a church secretary who defines her entire identity through Christian morality. And Mary's mother is running an illegal gambling operation in her living room. The same living room where Sheldon sits and does homework. The same living room where Missy plays. The same living room where George brings the kids for babysitting. Meemaw is exposing her grandchildren to criminal activity while their mother preaches the 10 Commandments at church. And the show frames this as comedy. Wild Meemaw, the rebel grandmother, the woman who does not play by the rules. The audience laughs. But strip away the laugh track and what you have is a gambling addict running an illegal operation in a house where children are present while their grandfather is working himself to death to pay for the education she is undermining. And then there are the men. Because Meemaw's gambling is only one tentacle of the pattern. The men are another. Charlie is a wealthy man who genuinely cares about Meemaw. He treats her well. He is patient. He is generous. And Meemaw uses him. She extracts money from him to cover her gambling debts. She uses charm and vulnerability and the illusion of intimacy to keep the financial pipeline open. And when Charlie's usefulness runs out, she moves on. Then Dale arrives, and Meemaw's approach to Dale reveals the manipulation even more clearly. She uses jealousy as a tool. She engineers situations to make Dale feel insecure so that he tries harder. She withholds affection strategically. She creates emotional uncertainty that keeps Dale chasing her approval. These are not the behaviors of a woman in love. These are the behaviors of a person who has learned that relationships are transactional. You provide something. I provide something. And the moment the transaction stops being profitable, I find a new partner. Now I want to be careful here. Meemaw is not a monster. She is a widow. She lost her husband. She raised her daughter alone. She has experienced genuine loss and loneliness. And some of her relationship behavior is clearly rooted in a fear of being abandoned again. But the pattern is the pattern. Charlie was used for money. Dale was managed through manipulation. And neither man was ever given the kind of honest, vulnerable conversation that would have made the relationship real instead of functional. Meemaw does not do honest. Meemaw does not do vulnerable without a strategy behind it. Meemaw does charming. And charming is the performance a person gives when they are too afraid to give the truth. Meemaw gets arrested. The illegal gambling room is discovered. She faces real legal consequences. Probation, a criminal record. The entire Cooper family is dragged into the situation. And here is what happens next. Nothing. The show gives Meemaw a legal consequence and then absorbs it into the comedy. She gets probation. She complains about it. She makes jokes. The family rallies around her. Nobody sits Meemaw down and says, "You are an addict. You ran an illegal operation. You gambled away money this family needed. You manipulated men to cover your debts. You put your grandchildren in proximity to criminal activity." Nobody says any of that, because Meemaw is lovable, and lovable people do not get confronted. They get forgiven, automatically, without accountability, without change. The arrest should have been the turning point. It should have been the intervention. The moment the family looks at the fun grandmother and sees the functional addict underneath. But the show could not afford to make Meemaw accountable, because accountable Meemaw is not fun Meemaw. And the audience wants fun Meemaw. So the arrest becomes a punchline instead of a reckoning. And the addiction continues, because nobody has the courage to call it what it is. Now let me talk about the other cost. Because the gambling is the visible damage, the invisible damage is worse. Meemaw was the only person in the Cooper family who had relationships with everyone. Mary listened to Meemaw. George trusted Meemaw. Sheldon respected Meemaw. Missy adored Meemaw. Georgie confided in Meemaw. She was the hub of the family, the one person who could walk into any room and speak to any Cooper without resistance. That access is power, real power, the power to change a family's trajectory with one honest conversation. And Meemaw never used it, not once. She could have told Mary that Sheldon is not the only child in this house, and your other children are suffering from your neglect. She never said it. She could have told George that he matters and the family sees him, and he should not sit on that patio alone. She never said it. She could have told Sheldon that his brain does not exempt him from being kind to the people who sacrifice for him. She never said it. She could have told Missy that her emotional intelligence is a gift, not a consolation prize. She never said it. Every critical conversation this family needed was within Meemaw's reach. She had the standing. She had the trust. She had the access. And she used all of it to be fun, to be the cool grandmother, to be the one everyone loves and nobody blames, because having difficult conversations risks being disliked. And Meemaw would rather watch a family collapse than risk being disliked by anyone in it. And this is where it gets personal for me, because the relationship between Meemaw and George is the most under-examined relationship in the entire franchise. George trusted Meemaw. He relaxed around her. He joked with her. He treated her like a real mother-in-law who was also a real friend. And Meemaw liked George. She genuinely liked him. She saw what Mary was doing to him. She saw the distance growing. She saw the loneliness settling in. She saw a good man being slowly erased by a family that needed him too much to see him. And she said nothing. She watched George Cooper disappear into the patio, and the beer, and the silence, and she said nothing to her daughter about what her daughter's behavior was doing to her daughter's husband. Because saying something would mean confronting Mary, and confronting Mary would mean a fight. And a fight would mean Meemaw might lose her position as the beloved neutral party, the grandmother who takes no sides, the woman everyone trusts because she never challenges anyone. George needed one person to tell Mary the truth. Meemaw was the only person who could. She chose her own comfort over his survival, and George died without ever hearing the words he needed to hear from the one person who could have said them. And then George dies, and the family enters freefall. And this is where Meemaw makes the single most destructive decision of the entire series. After George's death, Mary spirals into religious extremism. She decides the children need to be baptized, not as a gentle spiritual gesture, as a compulsion, a grief-driven demand for control in a life that has just proven control is an illusion. She needs the children baptized because she needs to believe that God is listening, that the deal she made is still active, that if she does enough righteous things, the universe will stop taking people from her. Missy resists. She does not want to be baptized. She is a teenager. She is grieving. She is not ready to make a spiritual commitment under pressure from a mother who is using religion as a tourniquet for a wound that faith cannot close. And Meemaw tells the kids to go along with it. Just do it. Just let your mother have this. It will make her feel better. It is not a big deal. Just go along with it. That sentence. Just go along with it. That is the sentence that created the Big Bang Theory version of Mary Cooper. Because the children went along with it, and Mary's behavior was never challenged, and the grief-driven religious compulsion was never interrupted, and it hardened. What should have been a temporary response to loss became a permanent personality, because the one person who could have said, Mary, this is not healthy, this is grief not faith, you need to stop, that person said, just go along with it instead. If Meemaw had told Mary the truth after George died, if she had said, Mary, you are scaring your children, your religion is becoming a weapon, you need help, not a baptism. If she had said any of that, the next 20 years of the Cooper family might have looked completely different. Mary might have gotten therapy instead of getting more church. Missy might have had support instead of silence. Georgie might have had a mother who was functional instead of a mother who was a mess. But Meemaw said go along with it, and the family went along with it, and they have been going along with it ever since. And here is the writer-craft insight that makes all of this calculated rather than accidental. The writers built Meemaw to be bulletproof. They gave her the best lines, the sharpest comebacks, the coolest hobbies, the most entertaining relationships. They made her the character the audience quotes at dinner and names their fantasy grandmother after. And they did this specifically so that her flaws would be invisible. Because a character the audience loves unconditionally is a character the audience will never hold accountable. And a character who is never held accountable can do enormous damage to the people around her without the audience noticing or caring. Every time Meemaw gambles and the audience laughs, the show is training you to forgive addiction. Every time Meemaw manipulates a boyfriend and the audience cheers, the show is training you to reward toxic relationship behavior. Every time Meemaw avoids a hard conversation and the audience sighs with relief, the show is training you to accept that honesty is optional as long as you are funny. The writers knew what they were building. They built a character who could destroy a family in slow motion and receive a standing ovation for doing it. Meemaw is not a villain. I said it at the beginning and I will say it again. She is a widow who lost her husband too young and raised a daughter alone, and built a life out of whatever tools she had available. Some of those tools were healthy. Her love for her grandchildren is genuine. Her presence in the Cooper home was stabilizing even when it was not honest. Her humor kept the family from collapsing under the weight of its own dysfunction on more than one occasion. But she is also not the hero the audience has made her. She is a functional gambling addict who used men as financial life rafts, avoided every difficult conversation her family needed, enabled her daughter's religious extremism with a single sentence, and gambled away money that a dying man was earning with his dying body. She is not a villain and she is not a hero. She is a grandmother who chose to be loved instead of being useful, and in a family that was starving for one honest voice, choosing to be loved was the most selfish thing anyone could do. George Cooper worked 2 jobs in the last year of his life. He came home exhausted. He sat on the patio, he drank his beer. He stared at the sky and wondered if the money would be enough, if Sheldon would get to college, if the fund would hold, if his body would hold, if any of it would work out before the weight crushed him. And somewhere across town, his mother-in-law was sitting at a poker table in her own living room, shuffling cards, pouring whiskey, laughing with strangers, losing money that was supposed to go to the same place George's body was going, toward Sheldon's future, toward the one thing the entire family had agreed was worth any sacrifice. George sacrificed his body. Meemaw sacrificed the money. The difference is that George knew what he was giving up. Meemaw pretended she was not giving up anything at all. The audience loved her for it. The show rewarded her for it. And a man died at 42 with a heart that stopped beating because it had been carrying weight that someone else kept secretly adding to. Meemaw did not kill George Cooper, but she made the load heavier. And she made it heavier while smiling, while shuffling cards, while being everyone's favorite character in a show about a family that was quietly falling apart. That is the truth about Meemaw. Not that she was bad, that she was loved. And being loved was the only thing she cared about more than being honest. And a family that needed honesty got poker chips instead. If this hit you the way it hit me, you know what to do.